Morning, Peace Chapel. Part of a message series called WISER, and the subtitle of the message series is How to Leverage Past Mistakes to Create a Better Future. How to leverage past mistakes to create a better future. If you've ever made a mistake in any of the major areas of life, like your finances, relationships, with your health, maybe getting addicted to some sort of drug, you know how painful it can be. It can be extremely painful. And so it's important for us that we learn from our mistakes so that we can make sure that next time won't be like last time. Life already has enough unavoidable pain. In other words, if you did everything right, if you crossed all your T's, dotted all of your I's, you're still going to experience some pain. Some pain is just unavoidable. So why invite unnecessary pain into our lives? Last week, I pointed out something to you guys that all of us have in common when it comes to making mistakes. And here's what we all have in common when it comes to making mistakes. We learn the most from our mistakes in the areas of life that matter least. We learn the most from our mistakes in the areas of life that matter least. Areas like playing a video game. We learn from those areas of our lives where we make a mistake. I told you guys last week that I made a mistake when I made Sister Kennard's pound cake for the first time, that I got it wrong the first time. I took her ingredients, but I didn't follow her instructions. I did it the second time and I got it right. I learned from my mistake. We learn from our mistakes in the areas of life that matter the least, but we repeat our mistakes in the areas of life that matter the most. Areas of life like finances, like our health, like our relationships, like our marriages. We tend to repeat those mistakes over and over and over again. And I pointed out that the biggest contributing factor to us continuing to make the same mistakes over and over again are the lies that we tell ourselves. That we tell ourselves lies and we actually believe them. And I pointed out two big lies last week that we tell ourselves. The first lie that we looked at was the know better lie. And the know better lie is this: I'll do better this time because I know better now. And what I pointed out last week is that there is no connection. There's not necessarily a connection between knowing better and doing better. We all know people who know better, but they still do the wrong thing. Even us. We know better, but we still continue to do the wrong thing. And so just because you know better does not mean that you're going to do better. Experience in one season of life doesn't necessarily prepare you for the next season of life. Experience alone does not prepare us for what's next. It's evaluated experience that prepares us for what's next. And so today we're going to do a little bit of evaluating our experience. And so that's the know better lie. The second lie that we looked at was the time lie. And that is that time is against me. And I told you that this is probably the most dangerous of all of the lies. Time is against me. The clock is ticking. I'm not getting any younger. All of the people my age are doing this. My girlfriends are doing that. And we feel like time is against us. And what I pointed out was, if you're leaving one painful season of life and getting ready to go into another season of life, the last thing that you need to do is to rush right in without properly evaluating. And so time is not your enemy. Time is not against you. Time is actually your friend. And this is especially important for those who are regularly in and out of relationships. And you keep asking yourself the question, why do they keep ending the same way? And you see, if you examine the relationship, what you will discover is the common denominator in all of the relationships is you. You keep following yourself around. You keep popping up everywhere you go. You can't seem to shake yourself. And so everywhere you go, you are going to find yourself there.
Amen.
And then we looked at this one question that I discovered in a book that I read that I believe will impact your life because it has greatly impacted mine. It was a question that I challenged you to filter all of your decision making through. And the question is, what is the wise thing to do? Not what is the legal thing to do. This is a better question than that. Not what I can get away with, but what is the wise thing to do? And we looked at this question from 3 different angles: past, present, and future. Past. In light of what I've experienced in the past. What happened last time when I went out with a roughneck? What happened last time when I allowed my emotions to get me to make that purchase? In light of what I've experienced in the past, what is the wise thing to do? Taking into account my current circumstances, the present, my current circumstances. Maybe at one point in time I could do it because I wasn't single. I was single back then, but now I'm married. I have kids now. And so taking into consideration my current circumstances, what is the wise thing to do? And then future. Based on what I want my life to look like in the future. I want a peaceful marriage. I want peaceful relationships. I want to be healthy financially. I want to be healthy physically. Based on what I want my life to look like in the future, what is the wise thing to do? And I pointed out that a clear personal vision is the springboard for making wise decisions. That you and I, we must know where we are going. If we don't know where we're going, then we won't know when we get lost. And so what is the wise thing to do? And so if you missed last week, or if you heard last week and you want to hear it again, or perhaps you want to send it to someone else, we will send it out this week on our text alerts. So that means that you have to opt in. And so I encourage you guys to take a picture of this. But basically what you're going to do is from your cell phone, you're going to text Peace Chapel, all one word, Peace Chapel to 31996. Make sure that you bring the word together because sometimes autocorrect will separate the words. And if you want to get it in Spanish, it's Bienvenidos to 31996. All right, so today we're going to do a little bit of evaluating. The title of today's talk is Own Your Part. And I want to be honest with you up front. I'm going to tell you up front. Today's message is probably going to be uncomfortable. But I want you to know that it's coming from a good place. That I want what's best for the people that God has entrusted to my care. Even if you're just here for Mother's Day, I would never do anything personally to hurt you. But sometimes we have to get uncomfortable before we get comfortable. As some of you guys know, I love playing dominoes. I play dominoes during my pastime. I'm always playing dominoes. Sometimes if I'm waiting on somebody, I just break out my phone and I start playing dominoes. In dominoes, this is considered to be a bad hand. Because you have a lot of doubles. You have all doubles, right? And if you're playing against somebody who knows how to play, they're going to make you pay for having a hand like this. It's hard to domino when you have a handful of doubles. If anybody knows anything about dominoes, you know that. However, if you get this hand right here, you have to play it. You have to make the most of this hand. You can't say because I have a bad hand, I'm going to just give it back. I'm not going to play it. Most of us in this room today was dealt a bad hand. Meaning that we've come from adverse circumstances. Maybe you experienced poverty. Maybe you grew up in a one-parent household, but everybody in this room was dealt a bad hand. That's not your fault. What you do or don't do with that bad hand, that's your fault. That's the part that you need to own. Here's what I mean when I say own your part. I need you to pay attention. This is important. If you don't take responsibility for your part of your negative history will show up in your future. This is so important that you get this. If you don't own the role that you played, the part that you played in your negative history will show up again in your future. Amen. But here's why it's difficult for us to own our parts. Because there's nothing to own. It's not my fault. She's the one that left. He's the one that cheated. They took advantage of me. It's not my fault. And the truth of the matter is that there's something inside of each one of us that we'd rather tell the version of the story that goes like this. They took advantage of me. They mistreated me. They did me wrong. And so how was I supposed to know that he was a mama's boy? Right. How was I supposed to know that she was a psycho? Right. How was I supposed to know that the engine was going to go out on that car? And so for us, we want to tell the version of the story that shows us getting taken advantage of, that shows us getting mistreated. But we must own our part. And so your best bet for leveraging past mistakes to create a better future is for you to own your part of the past mistakes. In a minute, I'm going to share an exercise with you guys that someone shared with me that was very, very valuable and helpful for me, and I think it's going to be valuable and helpful for you too if you apply it. But I want to look at a Bible passage that explains this whole dynamic of me being more likely to pass the blame than to assume responsibility. The Bible passage is found in the book of Genesis. And the reason why you and I are more likely to pass the blame than to accept responsibility is because we are related as human beings to two biblical characters in the Bible named Adam and Eve. Now, before you guys check out on me, I don't want you to think, when we talk about Genesis, I don't want you to think the Bible, but I want you to think about an ancient historical document that has been scrutinized, heavily scrutinized, and it has withstood the test of time. And it's still here. And even if you can't accept it then, right? Even if you can't accept it, even if you believe that the account of Genesis, the creation story that's found in Genesis, is just a myth, one thing that you will discover that is undeniable is that whoever wrote this had incredible insight into why human beings respond the way that they respond when they mess up. And so I want you guys to follow along with me in Genesis chapter 1, starting at verse 27. It says, so God created mankind in his own image. There's a whole lot tucked away in just that part right there. I hope to get back to this one day, but there's so much in that right there. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. So it says, according to the writer of Genesis, that God created man and woman. He created them in his image. And then he goes on to say, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth. Look at this. Subdue it or have dominion over it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and every living creature that moves on the ground. Every living creature that moves on the ground. And so God gives dominion of his creation to Adam and Eve, to mankind. He creates this beautiful universe and he gives them control of the universe. He says you are to have dominion over all of the animals, even the ones that move on the ground. Along comes Satan by way of a serpent that moves along the ground. God told them that they should have dominion over the animals, even the ones that move along the ground. Satan disguised himself as a snake, as a serpent, and he gets Adam and Eve to do what God told them not to do. Right. They listened to a snake over God. The snake got them to do what God told them not to do. God told them not to eat from the tree in the middle of the garden. God wanted to establish himself as the authority. God trusted Adam and Eve, but for whatever reason, Adam and Eve did not trust God. They disobeyed God. As a result, there was a break in the trust relationship. There was a break in the relationship. And as you fast forward, in chapter 3, verse 8, it says, the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from him. They hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. They're hiding from God now. God made mankind upright. Man has gone in search of many schemes. When we get away from what God has for us, we start hiding. The moment Adam and Eve disobeyed God, sin entered the world like a disease. Now, you might not like the word sin. You might not believe in the word sin. That's okay. You can call it whatever you want to call it. But you know, just like I know, that something is wrong. Yeah. You don't do everything that you say you're going to do. Right. Even though you know that you're supposed to do it. And so you know somewhere, somehow, something has got in there and affected the way we make decisions and respond to the decisions that we've made. Goes on to say, but the Lord called to the man, where are you? Isn't it interesting that when Adam sinned, God went looking for him? When we sin, God goes looking for us, but not to pay us back, but to bring us back.
Okay, all right.
When we sin, God goes looking for us. If you know the story, you know later on that God provided covering for them to cover up their shame. That was an extension or a demonstration of God's grace. And so God says, Adam, where are you? He answered, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. I hid. They had never knew what it was like before to be afraid. They had never knew what it was like before to be ashamed. But because they chose to disobey God, it opened up the door for all types of things that they had never experienced before, that God never even intended for them to experience. And so God says in verse 11, who told you that you were naked? When God asks questions, it's not for information. He already knows. the answer, but he wants us to know where we are. He says, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? Have you disobeyed me? And Adam said, yes, I did. And I take full responsibility. Do to me as you will, but leave Eve out of it. She is innocent. Those of you that know the Bible know that's not what Adam said. Those of you who believe me, you need to read your Bible. That's what he should have said. That's what he should have said. But here's what he said. He said, the woman. But he's not done. That you gave me. The woman that you gave me. She gave me some and I ate. In other words, Lord, take your time. But you and Eve owe me an apology. Then, what's interesting about this is, as I make the connection to you, is that what Adam said was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. And see, you and I, we can grow accustomed to telling our version of the story that is 90% true. And we can grow so accustomed to telling the story that's only 90% true that we actually start to believe that it is the whole truth. And then he goes to Eve. The Lord God said to the woman, what is this you have done? The woman said, the serpent deceived me, and I ate. What she said was true. It just was not the whole truth. Now look at this. The very first thing that the two first people that God ever created did after they messed up was hide. The next thing that the very first two people that God created did was blame.
All right.
They hid and they blamed.
Wow.
What do? We hide and we blame. I told you guys, this is going to be uncomfortable, but it's the real. You can blame your way into the future, but you cannot blame your way into a better future. I want to say that again. You can blame your way into the future, but you cannot blame your way into a better future. I have never met anyone successful that got there by blaming other people. Never. There are dangers associated with blaming. So many dangers. I want to point out two dangers that are associated with blaming. The first danger associated with blaming is that blaming others enables us to take our unhealthy issues with us into the future. Our unresolved daddy issues, our unresolved mama issues, our poor communication skills, our pride issues. Blaming other people enables us to smuggle it, right? Because we're not looking at ourselves, we're looking at the 90% that they did, and we're tucking away the 10% that we did, and guess what? It shows up in the next relationship. Why? Because you keep following yourself around.
Okay.
Wherever you go, you're going to find yourself there. Second reason why blaming is so dangerous is because blaming sets us up to repeat the same mistakes. I had 2 car accidents this year. This is only May. 2 car accidents this year in May. The first car accident, both insurance companies said that we were both at fault. So let me explain to you guys how this went. The guy was turning the corner, making a left turn, and I was pulling out. And the guy ran into me. There were 2 lanes for him to make a turn in. Legally, he's supposed to turn into the lane that's closest to him. He turned into my lane, and he hit my car. The insurance companies both said it's both of our fault. Because I'm supposed to check before I pull out to make sure that there's no cars coming. Guess what version of the story that I went around telling? That he turned the corner and hit me. What I said was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. Fast forward, I have another accident. 2 accidents in less than 5 months. This one was clearly my fault. I left the stop sign turning left, and the guy was going west, and I ran into him. It was clearly my fault. But immediately I started looking for things to show that it wasn't my fault because the house was a little bit too far out and I couldn't see the car coming by. But the truth of the matter is, it was my fault. And so I said, it's time for an evaluation. It's time for an examination. And what I discovered was there were some similarities between the 2 accidents. Number 1, I was at both. Number 2, they both happened on a Friday. That probably means nothing. Both of them happened on a Friday. One of them was Friday the 13th. Somebody tried to make a big deal about that. It's Friday the 13th. But the 2 things that I felt like I really needed to pay attention to make sure that my next time is better than my last time, the 2 things that I evaluated very closely so that I can make sure that I can leverage this past mistake to make a better future was, number 1, in taking responsibility, looking at my part, the role that I played in it. Number 1, the 2 other things that they had in common was both accidents happened on my left side. Number 2, both accidents happened when I was beginning to take off. And so what did I walk away with? That there might be some vulnerable issues with me looking to the left. That might be my vulnerable side. Have you done proper evaluation to check out your vulnerable side? Because you do have a vulnerable side. The second thing was me, and they happened when I was taking off. And what I walked away from that with is that I need to pay more attention in the beginning. That I have a tendency to kind of jump out there without paying careful attention. Proper evaluation. Now, dig this. Had I evaluated the first time the way that I did the second time, more than likely the second accident wouldn't have even happened. Are you guys with me?
All right.
And so for us, when we're getting ready to make that next season, that second time, that third time, we need to pause and do some evaluating before we move on. If not, we will repeat ourselves. And when we decide, listen to me, this is so important, when we decide to tuck our parts in and act like they don't exist, act like they're not there, our controlling issues, our insecurities, when we decide to tuck those things in, it gets in the way of us seeing clearly what our next move should be. Jesus talked about this. He said something about this in his Sermon on the Mount, and it underscores what I'm telling you right now, that we need to come clean about the part that we played in the problem. That it's something about when we come clean that it brings about purity. And Jesus said this in his Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, verse 8. He says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." There is something about purity that brings about clarity. If you don't have clarity, you have no business making any major life decisions. And the way that we get clarity is for us to come clean about that icky stuff that's on our hearts. I know it's the other person's fault. I know the other person played a role, but we're not talking about the other person right now. We're talking about you. So I want to share this with you that someone shared with me. It's called the circle of blame. Actually, I named it the circle of blame. They named it something else. But I named it the circle of blame just for the purpose of illustrating this to you guys. This has been extremely valuable to me, and I believe that if you utilize it, it will be valuable to you. I want to encourage you guys to go home and write a circle, right? Write a circle and call this circle the circle of blame. And whatever part you play in your negative history, no matter how big it is, no matter how small it is, you need to own it. If it's 50%, that's your part. If it's just a tiny bit, look, if it's just a tiny bit, just a real small amount, that's your part. You need to own it. Now here's what I discovered. It's easy for us to own up to it when it's mostly our fault. It's difficult for us to own up to it when it's just a little bit our fault, because we can miss it. The bigger the emotional trauma, the harder it is for you to own your part. But if you don't want this stuff to creep into your future, you must own it. There is no message that I've ever preached that I'm more convinced of when it comes to you getting better in life. You will not get better blaming your mama, blaming your daddy, blaming your baby daddy, blaming your baby mama. You gotta own this stuff. But as long as I'm focused on what they did, I'll never see what I did. And so what I want to do, I'm almost done, for the next 5 minutes or so, I want to help you figure out how to own that part right there. Just that little tiny part right there. All right? This is important that we own this, no matter how big or how small our part is. We must own our part. So let's go. I'm going to give you guys some examples to help you, and I'm going to let you know this might be emotional. In some cases, it might even be embarrassing. And I believe the embarrassing factor is what contributes to us not being willing to own up to our part. You have to take inventory. You have to take inventory. There's no way around you taking inventory. So let's go. I had a feeling something wasn't right, but I didn't want to accept it. I ignored the obvious. That's your part. It was obvious to everybody else. You're willfully naive. You got to own your part. It was obvious. If you don't own your part, guess what? You're going to repeat the same mistakes. I knew I couldn't afford it, but I bought it anyway because I wanted to impress people. See, that's the issue. That's not going to go away because you leave that job. That's not going to go away because you move to another state. That's not going to go away because you marry somebody else. You live to please people. You live to impress people. That's an issue. You need to own it. I was willfully naive. Yeah, he's a bum. He's not helping me to take care of these kids. Neither did the last one. You keep repeating the same mistakes. You keep falling for bums. You are willfully naive. You need to hit the pause button. You need to do some evaluating. Here's another one. I didn't do my best. Yep, that teacher was a piece of work. That boss, he had it in for me. She had it in for me. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't do my best. You got to own that. I met a young man the other day. Very articulate. But he kept saying, everything he talked about was people discriminating on him because he's black. They did me like that at the bank because I'm black. I didn't get that job because I'm black. He's so focused on people discriminating on him because he's black that he's not owning up to the part that he's playing in his own negative history. He didn't present himself well. He spoke well, but he didn't present himself well. And we all have stereotypes. We do it all the time. It's just a part of life. You have to own your part. How about this one? I'm insecure. Checking his phone. Worried about my weight. I'm insecure. He was mean towards me, yeah, but I'm insecure. You have to own it. You have to own that part. I was too proud to apologize.
Oh, Jesus.
I knew I was wrong, but I just couldn't muster up the strength to apologize. I was proud. You have to own it. How about this one? I have commitment issues. When things start getting serious, I bail out. I have commitment issues. You have to own it. I was jealous. I saw my cousin advancing. I saw my best friend, it looked like she was doing good in her relationship. I was jealous. So I went out and I financed that car. I got involved in that relationship that I felt like I had to be in because I felt like I was getting left behind. I was jealous. You have to own it. It's just a small part, but you still have to own it. I have a problem controlling my tongue. Yes, he became distant. He stopped talking to me. But perhaps he stopped talking to you because you started talking to everybody else about everything that was going on in your private life. And it got back to him. You talk too much. You need to learn how to control your tongue. That problem is going to pop up in your next relationship. It's going to pop up at your next job. It's going to pop up in the next city that you move to. You have to own it. Wherever you go, there you are. And how about this one? I kept telling myself, I can handle it. I wanted everybody else to believe that I can handle it. But the truth is, it was handling me. And now my life is a mess. I knew I shouldn't have got in that car. I knew I shouldn't have went to that party. I went anyway. But the version that we want to tell is the police pulled us over and treated us bad because we were black. Not the part that we were drunk driving and we were irate and we were rude and we were disrespectful. The part we want to tell is when he cheated. But when we cheat, we rationalize it because we say, I cheated because he cheated. The truth of the matter is, you cheated because you thought it would make you feel better. If you're a people pleaser, you need to own it. The truth of the matter is, you were doing for them what they should have been doing for themselves. You are an enabler. Own it. Whatever your party is, you must own it. So next time can be better than the last time. But not just because you want it to be, but because you plan for it to be.
Amen.
Most people don't go out and plan to make mistakes over and over and over again. They just don't plan not to. And so what I want you to do is, I want you to take some time to evaluate your experiences. You make peace with your negative past by owning your piece of your negative past. You have to take time and do this inventory. I've done well with this in some areas, and I've done not so well in other areas. But I know that this stuff works. I want to tell you this story, and I'm done. I believe that God wanted me to tell you this story. I met a man yesterday, and I believe this story is for this message. The man was going to a bar at 8 o'clock in the morning. And we got in a conversation, and he said that he told me that he lost his job where he was making $70,000 a year with a 401k plan, pension plan, all of that. He lost his job because he made a decision to leave Vegas intoxicated and driving. He got pulled over, got a DUI, it cost him his $70,000 a year job. He was without that job for 3 years. For 3 years, he had to live off of half of the money that he was making. It ended up costing him relationships. It costed him a lot of time. He made the choice to get behind that wheel. He owned up to it. He says, I will never make that mistake again. In light of what I've experienced in the past, what is the wise thing to do? But then he told me the story. He went on to tell me a story about how he had been married for 24 years. That's a long time to be married. 24 years. That's a lot of your life. He was married for 24 years. And him and his wife recently got divorced. He said after the divorce, he says, I can't recall ever living by myself. I was so lonely going back to that apartment every day. I was lonely. I couldn't stand living by myself. He entered into another relationship before he properly evaluated the part that he played in the previous relationship. And he says, you know what? She's a good girl, but I'm not good for her. Because the same things that I was doing in my previous relationship is starting to pop up in this new relationship. Why? Because wherever you go, you're going to find yourself. You're going to keep on following yourself around. And so before you jump off into what's next, you need to hit the pause button. And you need to do some real evaluating. I cannot overemphasize the importance of this part right here. Wiser. We want to be wiser. We want to learn how to leverage past mistakes to create a better future, you got to do some evaluating. We're going to continue with the evaluating process next year. But here's what I want you guys to do. When you do the evaluating, I want you to invite God into the evaluation. Even if you don't believe in God, just do it, just to please me, all right? And you can even say this, look. You can even say this, God, I do have some doubts, but I'm going to try this thing anyway. And just begin the evaluation process. Lord, help me to see my part, the part that I played in my negative history. And I want you to do that every day starting today for the next 7 days.